Welcome back to Science versus Conspiracy over coffee. And today we are going to be diving into probably what I kept thinking is the elephant in the room because we haven't talked about it yet, but it's always on the top of everybody's conspiracy list. It's UFOs.
UFOs, unidentified flying objects.
Yeah, but I think they've changed it to UAPs now, so we got to get with the times.
Well, I wanted to ask you that because that was one thing I was going to bring up right away. When did they start calling that?
I think it was a few years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
So UAP, for
UAP.
people who don't know, it stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomena.
Yes.
Yes. So is that to distinguish itself? You know how people need to rebrand sometimes because they have a bad rep?
Yeah, I think the UFO the UFO industry has a bad rap, I guess.
So is that why they've done it?
Yeah, let's call it UAP because
that
I guess
weird?
there's more stuff that people are reporting in the skies than aerial crafts.
But okay, but they're keeping it aerial
They
here
are.
though. So
But there's there's things in the sky that people are witnessing that aren't like the typical flying saucer or the triangle shaped UFOs.
well, if it's not flying saucers, what are we talking about?
Well, that's why they've changed it and distinguished it, I think, because there's more to it than just flying saucers. Because there's reports of weird worm-like creatures floating through the atmosphere.
What?
Oh, yeah, there's all kinds of video.
What?
I'll link some of it in the description.
Big worms floating through the universe.
Well, no,
No.
through our atmosphere.
Through our atmosphere.
Yeah.
Big worms.
Big worm-like creatures.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're saying that there's these creatures that might be living in our upper atmosphere.
So is this, and this would be, if it were one of these things, would it be a UAP then and
Yes.
not a UFO?
Right, I think that's why they had to kind of expand it to
But are
beyond.
they keeping UFO as a phrase?
I think some people still call it ufologists. It doesn't really work with the upologists. UApologists.
You apologists. It sounds like you're apologizing for
that's,
something.
maybe that's what they intended
You
on it.
apologists.
Yeah, that's what they intended.
Yeah, that's really, really weird
Yeah.
because I wouldn't imagine that there'd be other things in the sky that aren't flying.
Well, there's other things like those wormy things that we just mentioned, but then there's also bat creatures like the Mothman and other.
But he can fly. Like things can fly, right? Animals or creatures can fly.
Right.
So doesn't that count as a UFO?
But I think that where they are trying to make the kind of distinction and differentiate between the two is like it's aerial phenomenon. So weird sort of bat people, Mothman, worm creatures floating in the sky, and UFOs, and even strange lights that aren't really associated with any sort of craft.
So maybe they've just made the category broader.
Yeah, they've just made it
Then.
more inclusive.
Oh, see, even ufologists have to be politically correct now
Yep.
and be more inclusive. Okay, I like that. Okay, but I'm still not going to call them apologists.
That's what they want us to do, is apologize.
I'm still going to call them all UFOs instead of UAPs anyway. I think I'm old.
It rolls off the tongue better, UFO.
Yeah, I can't make that change. I'm too old to change.
So I just wanted to have kind of a general discussion today about UFOs. Are they real? Are some of them real? Because there's a lot of cases that they still can't fully identify and explain away through scientific means. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're extraterrestrial or interdimensional or anything like that, but there's still a certain percentage of sightings that are still unidentified and unexplainable.
Right. And just so you know, folks, we're not diving really deep into any particular instance today. You know, like we could do multiple shows just about Roswell, and we could do
Hmm.
multiple shows about things over England. Like there's so many different phenomena that we could be talking about. We're not really getting really technical into anything today. I'm sure, Bob, you've probably got a list of specific incidents that you'd like to discuss at a later point.
Oh yeah, there's a whole list of topics.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So today's just kind of like an intro.
It's an intro.
It's an
So
intro.
if anybody is just diving into UFO UAP research area, this will be a good beginner's guide.
But is it though? A beginner's guide is like comprehensive, and we're not going to be comprehensive.
Well, not a full okay, it'll be like the Coles Notes UFO for Dummies type of thing.
Okay, so what goes into the Coles notes for UFOs for Dummies?
Well, before we do that, before we jump in, we got to talk about the coffee.
Okay, tell us what you're drinking today, Bob.
Well, I'm not drinking. Earlier on today, I was drinking Salt Spring coffee again, the Blue Heron we had.
Blue Heron. What a delicious coffee made by a local coffee roasting company in British Columbia.
Yeah, and thanks for the follow earlier in the week
Oh, yeah.
to
And
our
again,
Instagram.
not an ad, but thank you, Salt Spring Coffee.
Let's give you a little bit of a shout out there.
Yeah, yeah, which is very exciting.
Yeah. So grab your coffee, sit back, and we're going to talk about UFOs over coffee or beer and water. What we have,
Whatever you have.
whatever you have, grab it, sit back, and let's discuss. We'll be right back. We are back and ready to dive into the alien UFO phenomenon for dummies.
Well, so it's funny that you would say that because I looked at a curiosity and there are actually books, UFOs for dummies, aliens for dummies. There's like UFO 101, visual guide to UFOs, aliens for dummies, all about abductions. Like there's actually a whole bunch of books that you can get that kind of covers the basics. So I think that's just hilarious. Now, we're not supporting any of these particular books. I'm not giving shout outs to any one particular book or author. But just the fact that these
They do
for
exist.
dummies books do exist is hilarious to me because whenever you think about that, it's like it's either a class that you need to take at school or like a skill that you need to learn or like a language.
I wonder
You
if
know?
there's like a UFO masterclass.
Yeah, I wonder, right?
Do they have them on Udemy?
Yeah, maybe. It's so funny though because like you think about piano for dummies, not UFO for dummies. But anyway, I digress. Go ahead.
Right. So basically, we have to kind of talk about. We have to talk about the phenomenon itself, and does it have any sort of basis in reality? Do they exist potentially? Starting off, the alien phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, has been dates back to earliest recorded history. Early humans seeing weird lights in the sky, strange beings coming down from the heavens back then, and interacting with early humans. So one of the things is, did aliens have a role in our development? Well, no matter if they're real or not, they did see early humans did see strange things in the sky, so that automatically adds to our human history and our development. But are they a real phenomenon that creatures from another planet have come down to our planet and interfered directly?
Well, I think for the most part, when you're thinking about those really old instances, they're talking about comets, right? People didn't understand at the time what comets were.
Right, to a large degree, I think you're correct. But when they start drawing these cave drawings with flying saucer type ship designs that aren't like a big ball of fire, then I think then that's when you really have to start to question the authenticity of it, and were they really seeing these ships way back when?
So, are there actually cave drawings of UFOs?
Yeah, I'll link some in the description and put in our Instagram stories.
Have they been carbon dated, like the the chunk of granite or not granite? Oh my god! Like the rock that they're carved into. Have they been dated?
As far as I'm aware, yeah,
Really?
they've been authenticated that
That's what I'm looking
yeah,
for.
that they have been. That some young punks didn't just come in and spray paint or carve into the wall
Yeah,
of the cave a little picture of a little gray alien and the flying saucer. These things
yeah.
have been recorded dating back thousands of years.
Wow. Okay, I did not know that. That's wild.
Yeah, and they're seeing these things that aren't fireballs because there's also comets in the cave drawings and the written record, but there's also those classic UFO shapes also created. And then as we evolved out of the caves and started painting, there's a number of famous paintings with strange crafts, flying vehicles in the background well before we had the technology to fly.
Right, but also haven't there always been drugs? So how do we know these aren't just, hallucinations, auras, somebody not realizing,
Well, back when these paintings were done, they're often commissioned by kings and queens and royalty, and that's how they afforded to do what they did. So they wouldn't really be putting strange UFOs. It wasn't until much later, during probably the Impressionist periods, when it was becoming more affordable and they weren't being commissioned from kings and queens to be producing these artworks, and that you could start to see some interpretation of maybe it was more drug related or
right.
imagination, adding some imagination into it. But back in the day, like during the Renaissance, they didn't have the luxury to spend and put extra details of fantasy vehicles in their paintings unless they actually saw them, and that appealed to the ones commissioning the artwork.
That's really wild. I mean, again, we don't have time to get into all the history today. And definitely, folks, please let us know if this is something that you would like us to break down over a series of different podcasts, and perhaps with video showing images like these ones that you're
Hmm.
talking about there. How did they kind of become more, I guess, mainstream phenomenon then?
Well,
I know it's a
obviously,
big leap from cavemen to paintings, but
yeah.
like what happened?
Well, then from cave paintings, like where it really started to take off, obviously, was 1947, Roswell, New Mexico. Even though there was a zillion sightings prior to Roswell, but that was the most famous crash, or that was the most famous UFO incident up until that point. And there was a lot of people had been seeing strange things in the sky, and especially with World War II and the nuclear the development of nuclear weapons. People had started to see all kinds of strange things in the sky, and one of the theories back then was that these UFOs were look interested in our nuclear technology to kind of study us and see if we were actually going to destroy ourselves.
Well, okay, but if they were interested in our nuclear technology and they were able to come from another planet to study us, wouldn't they probably already have advanced that far to have it themselves?
Oh, I'm not saying that they wanted it for themselves.
Oh, okay.
It's more of their, for as the theory goes, for thousands of years they've been watching over us, and we haven't had, up until that point, we didn't really have the technology to annihilate ourselves.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
when we created the nuclear bomb and the hydrogen bomb, and after that, these UFOs and strange crafts were many sightings were reported around nuclear test sites, nuclear power plants now, and well, we've seen what happened in Chernobyl and what happened in Fukushima. We have the power to destroy her
Yeah.
by accident,
Yeah.
even. So the theory is that they've been here and observing us, and they wanted to know what we're getting ourselves into. And some people say that they've intervened. There's stories about nuclear reactors being shut down because of UFO interference, like those strange stories.
Like in a good way.
Well, in a good
Like
way,
them
or in a,
stopping us from blowing ourselves up? Is that what you mean?
well, just in general, like the power going out at power plants, and when planes would fly nuclear weapons aboard, and the planes would like suddenly lose power and not be able to get off the runway, and
So it's benevolent.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Ah, okay.
yeah. So there's all kinds of stories like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our benevolent overlords.
Yes. They've been here for a long time, Mr. Mulder.
No, you wrecked it.
What's it?
Mr. Mulder.
Mr. Mulder.
They've been here for a very long time.
Maybe
No,
it's-
I wrecked it too.
You wrecked it too.
Mr. Mulder, they've been here for a long, long time.
It's the Mangala effect. I remember it differently. Right, so
And he says this as he's sitting in front of a poster of the one that's in Mulder's office, I want to believe, by the way, folks, just so you know.
I think I've had this poster. I've had several versions of it over the years.
Because I bought you that one.
You bought me this one, but I've had other ones. I had one hanging up at school, in art school, in my desk.
Cool.
Yeah. That was 1,000 years ago, people, by the way. So I guess the other thing that's most commonly associated with the UFO phenomenon would be abductions and cattle mutilations.
Aw, poor cows.
Poor cows. In areas of UFO hotspots, there are reports and documented cases of unexplained cattle mutilations. Like cows have been ripped apart or surgically killed with certain organs removed from their bodies.
Okay, so that brings me to this question then, because those are very different experiences. If your cow is ripped apart, and it's probably a wild animal
Probably.
eating it, but with surgical precision,
Most of them are surgical position. Most of them are very surgical in the way that they've been dissected and had certain organs removed.
okay, because that's very different and that's very creepy. Now, how do we know that's not just somebody that's like serial killer in the making?
Well, they'd have to be a doctor. I guess that's how precise and how skillful these carvings are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
and
unless
it's
we have a
well
lot of
documented.
Oh, for like 50 years or
Really?
more. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And they're not just from the United States, they're from all over the world.
Okay.
Oftentimes, there are reports of people being abducted from around the general area as these cattle mutilations. So,
Like concurrently?
well,
Like is somebody abducted and then the next morning they wake up and find a cow? Or like what
no, not
happens?
necessarily. Just kind of in the same general area, around the same general time frame.
Okay.
It's almost like they're what's ever happening is kind of going through the area and like surveying and doing stuff, and then mutilating cows, like taking the organs from them and doing whatever, and then tagging and abducting humans. And some people are abducted only once, and other people, it's a lifelong event for them.
Well, that I know very well from the X-Files. But, poor Dwayne Barry. But what about, so would they start with the cows and then like work their way up to humans? Is that the theory? Or is that just, are they random?
It's kind of random.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments and everything, but depending on the case and the location and the time frame and everything, there's no real method to their madness.
All right. Well, I mean, and again, folks, I guess this is why this is an overview.
So we're
Because,
getting general
yeah,
information here.
yeah, if we were looking at, between 1400 and 1550 in Scotland or something, then maybe there's a pattern. But
Right.
and that's just, I'm just throwing that out there. That's not an actual time frame of phenomena that I'm aware of. But yeah, okay, so that makes sense.
Right. So then there's the alien abductions that we just touched on, of people waking up in the middle of the night, feeling like they're paralyzed, bright lights, shadowy creatures, and then next thing you know, they're either missing time and they show up in a different location hours later. Some through hypnosis account that they were on an alien spaceship on a table being prodded at and being worked on surgically. People have come back with weird implants that they didn't have before, like in the back of their neck or in their arms or legs, strange tattoos, nightmares. And I know some of this can be passed off as sleep paralysis. We talked about this in a previous podcast,
Right.
about shadow creatures.
Right.
However, some people all are just missing time. They just
Blackout drunk.
blackout drunk.
Blackout drunk. Same with getting a tattoo or a piercing.
Yeah, but
Blackout drunk.
but these are people that went to bed or were driving home from work, not sober as anything, aren't even considering getting a tattoo, and then all of a sudden appearing hours later in a completely different location. Maybe they have different clothes on, or
Dissociative fugue.
their clothes are on backwards in some cases.
Mental illness.
Missing time, but people who have no other history of mental illness. This is happening too.
Psychotic break.
All possible.
All possible.
All possible. And I don't doubt that some cases are, but there's still that certain percentage of people that it can't be explained.
Hoaxes.
Can't be explained. Like the Travis Walton incident.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring that up because that's a very, very famous case, right? The Travis Walton?
Yeah.
1975?
And then they made a movie about it in the early 90s.
Right. So I have to admit, I haven't seen that movie.
It was a decent movie.
Is it documentary style or
No,
is it's fictionalized?
It's fictionalized, but from what I remember about it, they tried to make it accurate.
Okay. And so is his case purely unexplainable?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And he lost several days.
Yeah, he just disappeared. From what I remember, he was out with friends camping or something.
Logging.
Logging,
They were
yeah,
they were loggers, I believe.
right. And then there was a bright light. He was taken. The other guys saw what happened, I think, and then he was gone. And I think they're even being questioned by the police, and they thought that they murdered him and lots of
Right?
stuff. And then all of a sudden, a few days later, he shows up. Travis shows back up, and can't remember anything about where he's been, what's happened to him. But he has, I think, flashes of what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
And he was gone for like 5 days and there's zero explanation.
Yeah, nobody could figure out where he's been.
Wow.
Yep. So it's either a really elaborate hoax or something odd happened. Something extraterrestrial or that can't be explained.
Right. I mean, for sure they had to have done several medical exams, right?
You would assume, yeah.
You would assume. I mean, this was the 70s, so were they rigorous? I don't know.
But they probably
My
did.
family doctor used to smoke in the office.
Yeah, mine too.
So, like, come on.
But they probably would have done the best workup that they could have done given the time frame.
Okay. Okay.
Like with the tools and everything that they had available to them. Like I don't know if the FBI or
Well, I was just going to ask you that. Did the FBI get involved?
I'm not sure. I think they may have, but I don't know to what extent. Yeah. But yeah, so if this had, if this had happened today, they would have had more tools at their disposal to figure out what happened to them. But even today, people are still being taken, even with all the high tech tracking that we have on our phones and
Right.
surveillance cameras everywhere. People are still going missing and seeing these bright lights and then missing time.
Well, and you know what I think? I wonder, folks, we're watching, we just rewatched all of Stranger Things. We just finished the season 4, part 1. And then just for fun, we went back and rewatched all of the beginning as well. And I mean, the government, I know this is also fictionalized, etc., right? It's all fiction, but I mean a lot of it's based on stories that you hear that could be based on truth to some extent somewhere. I'm not talking about the mind flayer being real, but I'm talking about unexplained phenomenon. I'm talking about like the military police essentially coming in and taking people and locking them up and questioning them, and they're like prisoners.
Yeah, because I think wasn't Stranger Things roughly like based off of the Montauk project?
Loosely
Like there's some
inspired by.
inspired by.
Yeah.
Right, so that's another topic that
Yeah,
we'll
yeah.
get into. But I guess my point for that was just that even though it's a fictional TV show, it's drawing from real life, unexplained phenomenon.
Yeah, and my whole point with that was, yes, military police do go in and take people and bring them in for questioning, and so one would think that this happened with Travis Walton, which
Right.
is where I was getting a long way around. So one would think that even then in the 70s, he would have been questioned like crazy.
Yep.
Well, crazy. See what I did there. But, and I know I shouldn't really be using the term crazy as a, colloquial word because of the implications, and I do apologize. But it's something that I would imagine they take very seriously at the FBI and DOD.
Yeah, so there's a huge amounts of security around these military bases, not just Area 51, but other military bases, because after the crash in Roswell, supposedly parts of the UFO were taken to different locations.
Right. Okay.
So different Air Force bases have different components that are trying to back engineer
And study, right?
and study.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then that's apparently where some of these triangle shaped crafts are coming from, and these secret military projects that they're coming from are back engineered, reverse engineered UFO technology.
Right. So, on that note, talking about studying UAPs or UFOs, in case you folks haven't seen or heard, I know we've discussed it here. The meeting of science and conspiracy. It's like perfect, right up our alley because
NASA.
NASA has devoted $100,000 budget to examining UAPs. So,
Right. And that kind of brings up the history of Project Blue Book and the various incarnations of it from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. It always bothers me when I hear that NASA or another government agency is devoting money and studying the
yeah.
UFO phenomenon, because they're not going to tell us anything unless they want to tell us something.
Well, so here's the thing. So I read about just this one article about this proposed study. And what they're doing, it's very loosely an exploratory data collection study. And that's all it is. And it's not from classified military documents whatsoever. What they're proposing to do is just talk to all sorts of people, gather data. I guess it's like collecting stories from people.
Right.
From
Well, a documentary team could have done that.
Yeah, I know.
You expect more from the government.
But no, because they do have another stage. So what they're planning to do is collect this information from everybody from civilians to government agencies, nonprofits, any companies that have been looking at UFOs or looking for UFOs, whatever it may be, and seeing what data they can collect, then seeing what they're not grabbing and where the gaps are and how to best go about trying to collect that data, and then how to best analyze it all.
Right.
And so, like, to me, because it's a very exploratory, what we call in science a lot of times, it's like a pilot project, where you kind of don't know, you're doing something discovery, exploratory, because
I thought that's what the aliens were doing. Yes.
yeah, like there's something there, but you don't know until you really start looking at it what the best way to define it is and the best way to examine it. And so a lot of studies come from, you do a pilot and you get some initial data and some initial information, and they're like, okay, well, we actually weren't defining it rigorously enough. Let's redefine it now that we know more about it, and now we could better analyze, track, etc. Right? So that's kind of the idea, I think, maybe. But it was very telling that they're not using military data for this.
Right.
Very telling.
Yeah. Well, that's where they really need to analyze is the information that they're keeping from us. Like, anybody can go out and interview eyewitness accounts.
But these guys have a way of at least collating the data. They have a much broader reach than an Joe documentary team, right?
But who are you going to talk to? Who's the people, the eyewitnesses? Who are they going to talk to? The journalists or the U.S. military that they?
But it's not a military guy heading it up. Like, it's a guy from NASA. It's not like the DoD.
Tomato, tomato.
Yeah, I guess.
So in future episodes, we're going to dive deep into each one of these topics because it really deserves our attention and our time to fully flesh out alien abductions, cattle mutilation,
Project Blue
Project Blue
Book,
Book, the Men
Roswell,
in Black.
Area 51. Like there's so many
There's so
things,
many
like
things.
specifics.
Yeah, so we could go on forever
Yeah.
in this podcast about it.
Yeah.
So we're going to break it up into different episodes.
But we had to just start. We had to start somewhere.
We had to start somewhere.
Because we haven't started yet.
Yeah.
So we had to start somewhere.
So this was a good introduction, and we'll be back next week with some more weird and bizarre news and stories.
Let us know like what you want us to start out with when it comes to UFOs and aliens. If you have a burning desire for us to take a particular topic first, let us know. Otherwise, we'll just pick one and get going. But yeah, we'll be back. If you didn't catch it already, we've started to do little breakdowns of science news and conspiracy news during the week. So we'll definitely be back with that, what's hitting the news next week. So yeah, so we'll be back next week with that full-length podcast as conspiracy is promising. But for now, folks, signing out, I'm Jen. I'm the science part of it. And remember, stay curious, but rely on the facts.
And I'm Conspiracy, and remember, being paranoid is smart. See you next time. If you like the episode, don't forget to subscribe. You can download us on any of the major podcasting platforms. This week's episode of Science vs. Conspiracy over coffee was produced by Lethologica. Writing and research was done by Bob Homer and Jennifer Timer.